I remember the morning, Christmas morning, when my youngest decided that it was a lot more fun to give presents than to receive. He wanted to watch everybody else open the presents that he had spent time buying for them, and he wasn't terribly concerned about his own. And I remember that being an incredible moment of pride because that was the last child I had who had kind of crossed into that level of maturity on Christmas morning to recognize that giving was far more rewarding than receiving anything. And it's with that lens that we're going to look at the second half of the scripture this morning. We're not going to deal with Peter and Jesus being upset with each other. We're going to look at the next part where Jesus kind of addresses all the disciples, all the people who followed them, and kind of gets down and dirty with the whole what it means to be a Christian. One of the uh, sayings past generations of Christians would have picked up on is it's your cross to bear. Um, and that comes directly from this passage. The whole idea of that metaphor was that whatever your problem was, it's your problem. It's yours to carry. So if you have cancer, if you have hard financial times, if you had something else going on in your life that you really kind of were struggling to deal with. That's how past generations listened and read this passage, that it was your problem. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because what we're getting at today is Jesus talking about what it looks like to be Christian. Not the trappings, but the actual day to day walk. When we approach church in our society, in most places, and I'm going to paint in some rather broad strokes, most people who go to church because it's expected of them. They were raised that way. It's a social time. They get something out of it, but it's all me, me, me. And there's a value in that because that's how we build community is to spend time with each other and kind of get our fill of human compassion. But that is not a walk with Jesus. And in scripture today, we talk about what it looks like to walk with Jesus, what it means to give up our life for someone else, give up our life for Christ, not turn to wider societal norms. And that's a really simple message, but it's a really hard message because it means we have to live a different lifestyle than we normally live. A majority of people, they go to church, they sit there for an hour, they may be impressed by the preaching, they may not, they might like the music, they might not, they might even be bored out of their tree, and then they leave. And that's kind of the sum total of their involvement, their active involvement that week in church. And it's a societal thing. We've been conditioned that way. We have not taken seriously the responsibility to pass on our faith to the ones younger than us, to our children, our grandchildren, the community around us. And it's hard. I raised children and I still wish I had done a better job. My children, only one of them wants to even identify as Christian. So I get how hard that is when my entire profession, my entire calling doesn't produce people who want to be disciples. Then how can the average layperson do that? And that's something we really need to struggle with and look at a little bit because Christians are more, in North America particularly, are more apt to be apologists than faithful followers. They want to explain away why they do things in the church. They want to maybe spend a lot of time on the high holidays and not so much the day to day. It's really hard because we have all of these other outside forces pushing against us. And that's what Jesus talks about in the gospel today, about people being unfaithful, about people being sinful. Another translation uses the word adulterous, which is not sexual inappropriate behavior. It means unfaithful behavior. We live in this world and it is hard. And the only comparison I can give is an alcoholic or an addict trying to get their life back. That's what, as Christians, we kind of have to be. Someone who recognizes where we've gone wrong and try to get our life back. and it's uncomfortable. And I have no personal experience with alcoholism or any addiction, so I'm going with what I've been told is an equivalency for a faith journey, where every day a person with substance issues has to make the choice that this minute and eventually this 10-minute segment and this hour segment, eventually this day segment, they will make a conscious effort not to do something destructive. It's the same with our Christian life. If we want to follow Jesus, we have to really look at it. This moment, I'm going to make these choices. This day, I'm going to make these choices. Where does Jesus want me to go? That's not a mystery to anybody. If we've been spending time in church, we know the whole deal. We know the Beatitudes. We know we're supposed to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, house the homeless. We know what we're supposed to do. We know we're not supposed to get caught up in our own riches and our own benefits. But it's so hard because that is what society tells us really matters. So in the scripture, Jesus is calling us back, like the kid who matures enough to say I get more out of giving than receiving. As Christians, we have to get more out of living the life Jesus wants us than what the world around us tells us are the values we're supposed to want and espouse. It's not easy, but it's so possible. And part of the Lenten journey allows us to just take this time and to look at it a little more crucially. How do we make these choices? And you know what? If you haven't made these choices in the past, or haven't been good about it or consistent about it, it doesn't mean the game's over. You still have more and more opportunity. Because in the gospel it says, Jesus is not going to terribly respect those who have played at being Christian. He's more interested in the people who want the real goods, who've brought themselves, their brokenness to a situation. Another aspect of bringing up carrying the cross, which needs to be highlighted, is that we as a community of faith believers have to take on the responsibility not only of walking the way Jesus wants us to for our personal lives, but communally. What do we have to do to make the world the place that Jesus helped us envision? The world where there is no hunger, where women and men are created and treated equally, where non-binary folks are given as much privilege and respect as binary folks, where everybody, regardless of their orientation, their identity, their nationality, their creed, all people are equal. That's the vision. And incidentally, that's the vision of every single world religion there is, and a good number of the philosophies as well. We're given a path to that. It may not be an easy path, and it may be a path that we have to explain to other people a lot of the time. But maybe eventually they will see what we get out of it, because that's the deal. It's not just giving and not receiving anything back. When we get our maturity in our faith to a certain level, we start to feel the rewards. Giving up things that secular society tells us are of value is not as significant when we can actually see Jesus working in the world. The rush of knowing you helped make something better. And it's not about ego. I mean, you could go ego if you want to, but that's not where Jesus rewards us. It is, wow, I was part of this moment. And then you take that and you move on to the next time, all the while living and making the choices that this is how I want to be. That material goods do not matter. That the number of zeros in my bank account don't matter. That all the vacation hotspots I've managed to tick off my to-do list or my bucket list don't matter. None of that is living a good, rich, fulfilled life. Giving of ourselves, giving up, almost to the point of death. And for some Christians around the world, that will be the case. For those of us in North America, chances are 0 to none that's really going to be our situation. It's an opportunity to give what we can, what we have as gifts, our talents, our abilities, our being in the moment, being open to the Spirit. It is not a matter of trudging in pain and agony, to some kind of end that is dark and dismal. Past generations might have interpreted it that way, but that takes away so much of the richness of the life that Jesus wants us to have. Who wants to be part of something that is dark and dismal and you never ever feel the reward until the really, really end? And quite frankly, there's a bit of arrogance to that too, that how can someone else who enjoys life tell us that we can't enjoy life until the afterlife? Should never work like that, doesn't work like that. We shouldn't talk like that. Our rewards can be almost daily, but maturity in faith and maturity in generosity is where we need to go. It's not good enough to sit in church and pretend like we're doing the job when we know as soon as we leave we're off to doing something else that has far more enjoyment for us personally, and quite frankly is much more rewarded by society. To be Christian means that we have to follow a different set of values, a different set of rewards. We have to be part of a different lifestyle. It is countercultural. It is sometimes very lonely. It is isolating in ways that you can't even imagine at times. Even within the church, you will have people who want to keep secular values. We've called that prosperity gospel. It's alive and well, this belief that God gives us generously, therefore we can have all the yachts and cars and mansions we want. No, no, flat out no. That is not how this is done. We give from our abundance. We give to the point of feeling it. We give our time, our space, our extras. We don't have to accumulate in order to be able to do something. We can start from square one. In fact, accumulation usually gets in the way. Lift up the cross. Carry your cross. Carry this metaphor, quite frankly. Carry it into how you want to live your life. Like the alcoholic or the gambling addict or the drug addict who has to choose every moment to make a better decision. Like the kid who finally matures enough to realize it's better to give, far, far better to give than it is to receive. We can feel Jesus in our lives in those moments, but it's our choice. We have no puppeteer pulling the strings and making us do this. This is our choice to go forward, to have value, to be really participants in the creation of Christ. All of us can do that. None of us are excluded. We just have to want to do that. And sometimes that's kind of the biggest hurdle of them all. Just simply want to follow Christ.